had their absolutist monarchy. And part of that was because France and Spain didn't go through those revolutions. They didn't go through a revolution and all those difficulties that England went through in the 1600s. France's came later, and it was much more tragic, you could say, not only for France, but also for all of Europe. But England had that issue. In England, you could say geography-based, that English Channel, probably the most significant geographical feature of Europe. Having it's just a separate island, and so basically Britain won out over France, over Spain after the end of the French and Indian War. Great Britain was the undisputed superpower of North America and of the war. I mean, of the world, excuse me. And then when we broke away, the United States, we became the undisputed superpower of North America and then later of the world. And really the decaying Spanish Empire, as you mentioned, Michael, they didn't develop any of the necessary infrastructure. They just wanted to get gold and kill people. They put people on basically like slave plantation farms. One of the interesting things I think that often gets neglected is that the vast majority of the slaves from Africa, from the slave trade, they went to Spanish colonies. They went to South America, Spanish or Portuguese colonies. They went to Cuba. They went to Brazil, South America, where a lot of them died. The total amount of slaves imported from Africa, I think, into the North American colonies was around 400,000. Compare that to about the 9 million or something that went to the Caribbean and South America. I mean, it's just night and day, and most of them obviously tragically died.
I think you make a great point there, right? But there's something that also stuck out to me in reading this book, which is there was this germ of virtue and liberal tradition that was very special in Britain, even as we criticize it, and it pops up in this example in Maryland, right? When Maryland was created as a colony, right, the king granted Lord Baltimore a proprietary interest in all of Maryland. And that's the fiat property edict. And there you would say that looks no different than any other monarchy might have acted. But here's where it's different. One of the provisos is that he could only tax the people in the colony with the consent of an assembly of freemen that is convened from that colony. When that assembly convened, they refused to approve taxes for more than 1 year at a time. So we remember that, there's a proprietary colony, but if you think about how enlightened that was, right? That came, out of Britain in the 1600s. They sent a guy to colonize Maryland. They said, "Yeah, well, you're going to have to arrange elections of the free people in the state, and you can't tax them without their approval." You remember the taxation without representation. That was part of the culture, right? There aren't really a lot of examples in history of Spaniards and the French or the Indians that had that in their culture, that they had the right of approval over taxes from their governors. And yet somehow 150 years before the American Revolution, in the British psyche is this idea that, yeah, you may be the governor, but you still need to get the approval of the people that you govern when you tax them. And I thought that was very enlightened, right? And very liberal. And so you got to look at that and say that was in the culture, even in the excesses of the colonies when the governors were out of control. What's different is the people knew that was inappropriate, right? There was a sense, there was at least a ideological dissent that's not appropriate to tax people without their approval. It's not appropriate to stack the assembly. It's not appropriate to seize their property. And there are a lot of other societies where the view was whatever the leader wants is appropriate. And if the head of the tribe says you don't own property and you go there, then that's what you do. And there really aren't individual rights. So I think you got to trace for hundreds of years before the British ever arrived at the shore and look at the roots of that liberalism and that idea of individual rights for somebody.